Okay, so this is my level design assignment for BA Game and Entertainment Design by Connor Appleton 613362. The game I'm going to be making is a 3D platformer where the player has to complete the blocked out, the obstacle course within the given time period in order to advance to the next level, with each level based in a different setting. The level setting I've created in this environment is a desert themed environment with all the obstacles relating to a desert themed environment. For example, we've got the pyramid here, we've got like a bridge here that's broken down, we've got like our sandstone landscape and some rocks to go with it. We've got a little hut here and a castle here, and we've got some tunnels down here which are part of the game, which the player is unable to see. More to that in a second. When I was deciding on what kind of game level I wanted to make, I definitely put a lot of thought into what I was capable of making and a style of game that I'd enjoy making, which is how I came to the conclusion to make a platform style game. The kind of games that inspired me to make this level were games like the Call of Duty franchise, having a game mode called Free Run, which I really enjoyed, which I thought it'd be awesome to kind of gain inspiration off that. And Mirror's Edge as well was good influence for me to be able to create a game like this. Before making this game level, I did some research on several level design theories and good principles to add into my level. One video I stumbled across was very informative in terms of what makes a game enjoyable for the player in terms of referring to level design. This was by a senior level designer named Dan Taylor, and one particular factor he discussed was the idea of confusion, to make it not so obvious where the player has to go. And that for me was an idea I definitely took advantage of from my perspective, and I definitely looked into creating alternate routes or different routes the player could take, so that way if the player were to fail the course midway through, they could have a selection of different routes. They could try again or try something new, so they don't continuously get bored of repeating the same pathway in order to complete the game, which can lead to the player getting relatively bored if there was just there wasn't much pathway to choose from. Or also something I picked up on if I was going to create a game with lots of alternate routes, there would have to be some guidance, so the player would know where they're going and what they're doing, and to make sure it's not just one complete maze, they have to have some direction, which is where I got the idea of creating widget blueprints for my player to run into, which display text which give hints of what the player needs to do but don't directly tell the player what to do most of the time. Another thing I looked into was shape theory, which was from a YouTuber called I Teach 3D, which basically informed me that different shapes within a video game have different meanings. Pointy, kind of like cone-based shapes, signify that is more an obstacle the player would need to avoid, and a circular kind of shape would be something that a player would be approachable to player and not be considered an obstacle, whereas square-like shapes are more neutral kinds of shapes. For example, they don't really mean anything and they don't really do anything to throw the player off, which is why the majority of the obstacles are made from squares in this block out, when referring to the actual level itself. What I also took into consideration was the idea of creating quite detailed objects for the player to go across throughout the block out, so that way the environment will be able to have a story told about it, and so that way the player can feel like they're transitioning throughout the environment, rather than it just be kind of like the same kind of objects that they're going in and out of, in order to create more of a image for the player to kind of go across, which is why I switched up a lot of the obstacles throughout the game. In terms of the audio, I created several pieces of audio for obstacles that I wanted to trigger sound. For example, I have some fire in the tunnel as you can see there. My block out example, I put the crackling kind of sound effect for the fire, and then obviously I have some explosives as well in that tunnel as well. I created a trigger volume in order to make an explosion to send the player back if they were to make contact with that explosive. And obviously for the spikes, I created a stabbing, added in a stabbing sound effect for the audio, in order to for the player to know that they have been taken out by the obstacle. So when I began developing the block out, I started off with a concept level for me to get familiarized myself with Unreal Engine. As you can see, it's similar kind of pathway, but obviously without any real care taken into the geometry of the game and where the obstacles are being positioned. I just kind of played around with it a little bit. For example, there isn't that much detail or much information that tells you what the obstacles are there for, and as you can tell, they're not very well placed for the time being. Almost fell off. The fire right there, and then the player. This was originally supposed to be the bridge, but I decided to create it, add a bit more detail into it. As you can see, this would be where the player would jump across. As you can see, I experimented with invisible walls, so the player is now unable to go there. And obviously I had my my trigger volumes in there a little bit, but the problem is that they weren't accurately positioned, so you fall into the sand a little bit before the trigger volume would basically teleport you back to the position you would need to be in. So enough on the level concept, I suppose. As you can see, had the maze, I had the finish line, and therefore the environment wasn't really taken care of either. And as for the level itself, you can see I have the widget blueprints included. As you go up the stairs, there's 2 floors this time, where the player would have to look for where the actual exit is, and eventually when they find it, they would be told they will find the exit and then have to go across the bridge. And so you navigate the bridge without falling off, and once you have done that, you are then directed to jump into the box marked with an X, and then you choose your path. You can either go across the rocks or one of the spikes. I made sure to make the obstacles that you have to walk further distance to easier to do, to make it equal. For example, the rocks are actually harder to navigate but are closer to the player, so they don't have to do so much walking in order to make it more or less quite even. Now here you get a choice of what teleporter you want to go into, which lead into identical tunnels in terms of how they're developed, but the obstacles in them are actually quite different. For example, this one is full of spikes, and oh. Oh, it's quite difficult actually. Go over here. I'm not having a easy time trying to navigate this, even though I made it. Yep, yeah, I don't think it's happening. I think that might be something I need to do, is tone down the as you can see, game over. Retry. So we can have a little look. Have another little navigation. See, this is where I started to add in the element of confusion. Was in the pyramid. It was one of the first principles I started adding in, and then I started to look into the shape theory. Obviously, when I was creating my obstacles that the player would need to navigate, for example, the spikes, and obviously the fire is quite. It's quite evident you need to avoid them. Just have another little all around. So you can obviously navigate there, no problem. And then you make it to this exit right here. And then basically it says choose your favourite colour. There's nothing that really goes into it. I'm going to select the fire this time, well the red one, which is full of fire, the blue one is full of explosives. As you can see here, I think the green one probably is the hardest out of the lot I've created. Let's go through here. Then you have to avoid the flames that you have to jump through like a ring, and as you can see now you're greeted to the maze, and now you have to find your way out of the maze. It's pretty. This is more like a cooldown part of the game. For example, you've done the hard bit and now you're cooling down to just like a little maze you just need to navigate your way through. So that's another principle I looked into, is in the overall intensity. As you can see, I win the overall intensity of the game in general. Which parts of the game do I want to be most intense, and which parts of the game do I want to have the player cool down and relax a little bit? Like I didn't particularly want to make it gradual, because I wanted to make it a bit more like different and interesting, more unexpected for the player. So I decided to make the middle of the game more intense than the actual end of the game, so the player gets a little time to kind of like cool off and like relax a little bit, because there definitely is a lot of atmosphere going into the two little hut parts of the game, little like the tunnel and that lot. So that is all I have to discuss.